Once upon a time, there was a beautiful honeybee. She was gorgeous, golden and brown, and held an effortless elegance in her flighty form. She was born a worker bee and had to work hard, busy making honey for a living. She made the sweetest and loveliest honey in the world, and so delicious it was that it became known as the royal jelly. The honeybee made the same mistakes that most buzzy bees make and lived her life the best she could. But what she didn't know yet was that she was somehow destined to be a queen bee. Sadly, the tragic day came that in order to make ends meet, the honeybee had to leave her honeycomb home, the honeycomb she had lived in all her life. She had no choice but to go and labour as a busy buzzing working bee in the big hive. The big hive is a scary place, and like all big hives, it brings out the worst in bees. Nevertheless, in the big hive, there are also many soldier bees with large scary stings that offered some protection for the whole colony, and she managed to settle in, continuing to live her life as best she could, in the hope of better things to come in the future. Ultimately, her dream was to go back home to her family where she truly belongs. Meanwhile, far, far away, in another land, lived another worker bee, who somehow, from a very young age, had innately known that he was to be a bee king. He had no hive, he had no kingdom to reign, not yet anyway, but deep down to the tips of his antennae, he knew his purpose in life. As a worker bee, he had spent all his formative years flitting around the bee world, from hive to hive, pollinating, training, and learning how to rule. Whilst all the other bees went unknowingly about their daily lives, the uncrowned bee king would instinctively lead and guide them. The other bees could not understand his disposition, but the bee king would carry their heavy burdens of fear, jealousy, and anger anyway. After all, that was a king's karmic duty, so it was natural to him. When he ascended the throne, the bee king understood that to be a king meant making sacrifices and taking care of all of his colonies. He knew instinctively that a true king unconditionally loves and serves his fellow bees, and that is what he did. However, being a bee king is a lonely life, and eventually the bee king came of an age where he desired a queen to have his baby bees. Now, finding a queen bee is very difficult. They are few and far between, and usually very well guarded by the formidable soldier bees. For years, the king bee unsuccessfully searched the bee world for a queen. Kings recognized kings, and he instinctively knew that he could and would only settle for a real queen. Many more years passed, and the bee king had almost resigned himself to a life of unaccompanied reign. That is, until one day, in the most unexpected location imaginable, his eyes absorbed on the perfection of a busy, buzzing, working honeybee. As their eyes locked, the king's 6 knees went weak, and he knew in his joyful heart that this was a very special honeybee, and that this could be his last chance at happiness, and he quickly flew over to meet her. As they nervously and playfully flitted around each other, the honeybee had instantly recognized the weaknesses of the king bee and was further charmed by his trembling knees and wondrous wings, quickly nourishing him with her honey royal jelly, releasing him from his loneliness. This act of selfless kindness immediately convinced the bee king that this was the bee queen of his deepest yearnings, and as their intimacy quickly grew, they made a pact to never lie and always be honest with each other. The honeybee did not realize yet that she was actually a queen bee. Others around her did though, and it was maintained that soldier bees guarded her well, swarming in their drones to protect their queen, while subtly creating a disorder of deceit, cleverly creating doubt and suspicion in the young lovers' minds. The bee king continued his advances, and another fateful meeting with the honeybee ensued. He may have been a king, But in the act of love, all bees are just bees. The Bee King could not comprehend that this beautiful and kind honeybee was responsive of him, and his own fear, the fear that he was not worthy of her, overwhelmed him, scaring the honeybee to sting him in the heart. As the pain of the sting took hold, he begged for forgiveness and understanding, but the honeybee stood firm in her decision as the fantasy of being a queen was overcome by her own fear and demanding responsibilities, and she hastily flew away. Now you may be thinking that when honeybees release their sting, it is normally fatal to themselves. But a sting to the heart of another bee entails that they both remain alive, united in that for as long as her sting remains in his heart, they are both unable to fly. True happiness and the ability to fly again will only return to them both when she herself removes the sting. Many, many times, the Bee King returned to the big hive, but the honeybee had gone. So with an agonized heart, the king bee reluctantly returned home to his own hive and continued again to govern his colonies. To ease his pain, he sought the wisdom of the elephants and the bees, and all creatures great and small, but to no avail, for no bee-body had yet to discover the cure for a pierced heart aching in perpetual sadness. His feelings have remained deeply buried in all the years since, so that even now, the solitary Bee King still pines for his queen, his love for her never wavering, and the dull throb of the sting lodged in his heart, a constant reminder of a life that should have been, and a flickering dream of the hope that the beautiful queen honeybee will someday soon return to remove the sting of suffering, rescuing their karmic wings so that they may both fly free again.